Hello again and welcome. I want to thank everyone here for taking the time away from their newsrooms and their family to join us for what I know is going to be an interesting few days of conversation here at Nieman. As mentioned, I'm Sean Harder. I'm with the Climate Solutions team at the MacArthur Foundation, and we're really proud to be supporting this workshop and partnering with Anne Marie and her team here at Nieman and the team at the Center for Climate, Health, and Global Environment here at Harvard. This is the fourth workshop that we've now supported at Nieman, as Anne Marie had mentioned, on various topics, and I've been to 3 of them. And they always generate new ideas, new contacts, and new ways of telling stories that you can take back to your newsrooms and your communities. So I want to get right to our main event, but before I do, I just want to say a few words about the work that MacArthur supports in climate and our perspective on the issue. Earlier this year, you may have heard about the new policy change at the Guardian newspaper, and I'm going to have Emily correct me if I misrepresent any of this, but they made a decision to no longer use terms like climate change, global warming, but instead committed to use terms like climate emergency and climate crisis. I like that decision because that's the way that we've begun to start talking about this issue as well, because that is the problem we're facing. This is a climate emergency. So in the last few years since MacArthur started working on this issue, we've committed more than $300 million to organizations that are working to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to limit global temperature rise to 2 degrees Celsius. That's that scientifically agreed upon threshold at which, if we blow past it, things are going to get worse than they already are. We're going to see impacts worse than we're already seeing today. So we're focusing on supporting leadership at the local, state, and federal level in 3 different countries: the United States, India, and China, the 3 largest emitters who have to begin acting and working together to demonstrate leadership on reducing emissions. And as part of that work, particularly here in the United States, we understand the power of stories and narratives, particularly when it comes to countering the false narratives, the skepticism, the outright denialism that the fossil fuel industry and others have been funding to stymie action on this climate emergency for several decades now. Fortunately, however, I think we're turning a corner. We're coming to a moment, I think, where facts are actually beginning to matter, at least on this issue. So it's getting harder to deny the reasons behind the wildfires out in California, or the floods that wiped out crops in the Midwest earlier this year, or the severity of the storms that continue to batter our coasts. So the public is really looking to all of you, its journalists, to make sense of these changes, to cut through the noise with evidence and facts, to hold the powerful and the polluters to account, and to make those necessary connections between climate and health, climate and the economy, and I think most importantly, to assuage our fear and pessimism about our future with a little bit of hope and optimism. Because there are solutions to this emergency and reasons to be optimistic. A problem created by people, after all, can be solved by people. Many of those solutions hold the potential to transform our economy and create new jobs, to create a cleaner, healthier environment for all of us, and to secure a better future for our kids, the same kids that are asking us right now to take action on this. So I hope when this workshop ends on Saturday, you all walk away newly inspired and with new tools and ideas for how to explain this story to the communities that depend on you. So with that, I want to introduce tonight's keynote conversation, which will be moderated by Vanessa Hauc. Vanessa is the Emmy-winning senior correspondent for Telemundo and co-founder of her own organization, Sachamama. It's a nonprofit that educates the Latino community about climate issues and sustainable behavior. Vanessa will lead a discussion with Gina McCarthy. She's the professor of the practice of public health at the Harvard's Chan School of Public Health and the director for the Center of Climate, Health, and Global Environment. She leads the school's development of strategy in climate science, health, and sustainability, strengthens the climate science and health curriculum, and liaises with climate science leaders across this university. Gina has been a leading advocate for common sense strategies to protect public health and the environment for more than 30 years. She served under President Barack Obama as the 13th administrator of the EPA from 2013 to 2017. Her tenure as EPA administrator heralded the paradigm shift in national environmental policy, expressly linking it to global public health. She led EPA initiatives that cut air pollution, protected water resources, reduced greenhouse gases, and strengthened chemical safety to better protect more Americans, particularly the vulnerable. Gina signed the Clean Power Plan, which set the first ever national standard for reducing carbon emissions from existing power plants. And that underscored our country's commitment to domestic climate action and helped spur international efforts that help secure the Paris Climate Agreement. But as Anne Marie had mentioned, starting in January, Gina will be moving on. She will become President and Chief Executive Officer of the Natural Resources Defense Council, which is a MacArthur grantee, by the way. So
I noticed that.
You noticed that? Yeah. So we look forward to working with Gina and her new team at the NRDC for years to come. But with that, please give Vanessa and Gina a warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I have to say that it is truly an honor for me to be here with all of you. What an amazing group of journalists. I definitely want to say thanks to the Nieman Foundation, to the MacArthur Foundation, and to the Sea Change Center for putting together this critical event for all of us. And it is my honor to be here with this rock star, Gina McCarthy.
Get out.
It's always wonderful to see you, and thank you for the wonderful job
Vanessa,
that you do.
you're the rock star. Thank you.
Okay, so I would like to start talking a little bit about the work that you did here at Harvard. And I know that I was reading all the information about Sea Change, and it's this amazing center. And what I love the most is that really bring the connection between climate change to people, to public health, to the economy, to make it relevant for us. So what would be, did you achieve what you came to do here at the center?
We're getting there. First of all, let me thank Nieman for pulling this together. It's a wonderful opportunity, and thanks for the MacArthur Foundation for all of their support. Vanessa, no, it's never done until it's done, right? No, and I'm not leaving until I'm leaving either. I'm still on. I'll be on leave technically, and I'll still be working with the center as an advisor. So. I felt good about what the center was accomplishing because I think there is a change in dynamic. I think a big problem is that climate change has been a problem that if you talked about it, everybody sort of shrunk away. They didn't relate to it. They didn't want to hear it. It was always depressing. It still is a little bit depressing, I'll admit that. But we really wanted to personalize it. And so the work of the center was to try to go to a place which the Harvard School of Public Health really represents, a place where you can make very direct connections between what's happening on the planet and what it means for people. And I've spent what feels like a lifetime explaining to people to stop talking about the planet and to start talking about the people, because the planet is not at risk. It will continue. In fact, I think we are probably the species that is the most annoying to the planet. You know, it has nothing to do with the planet. It just doesn't care. And it's us. And so for us to be able to work with the School of Public Health and the broader university, frankly, to make it personalized, to make it matter to a human being. It is the only way that's going to make it relevant enough for anybody to do anything about it other than deny it. And really, that's the biggest challenge that we face. And I'm sort of excited about changes I've seen in the past few years. Vanessa, you know this. And I think I love the marches in the streets. I love the young people being involved. They just don't tolerate all of the nuance that we bring to the table, which is really not nuance. It's really lack of courage and certainty. And so I'm feeling more hopeful now, I think, than I've ever been before I've started getting engaged in climate change issues. So I'm feeling pretty good about where we are, but anxious that continues to escalate.
Yeah, I remember a couple of years, I think the first time that I saw you was maybe 4 or 5 years ago when Mr. Gore did one of his 24 Hours of Reality. And you came to talk about the link of climate change and public health, and you spoke so clearly, and you make it so easy to understand, to connect the dots, and I think you have done an splendid job at bringing that to the table of the conversations. But now there is breaking news because you have a new job.
I do. A new gig.
You do. And this is an amazing organization, NRDC. They have been working on fighting front lines in the climate issue for 50 years. So I would like you to tell us, why did you decide to embark in this new project?
Yeah. It was a big decision for me, as you can imagine, because I sort of envisioned... Let me tell you what I didn't envision. I didn't envision this administration. Yeah. I'm not trying to be political. I'm just saying, for reality, I never thought reality would be like it exists today. So I sort of envisioned that I'd hang out at the Kennedy School like everybody that leaves an administration does. And all the students would be in awe. And you think, instead of speaking to 300 people, 30 people was really great, and you'd have a good time. And so I did a fellowship at the School of Public Health, and I also did a fellowship at the Kennedy School. And reality just sort of pounded you in the head, and you realize that so I did what I thought was best. Instead of going to the Kennedy School and framing a place for myself, I went to the School of Public Health, because I honestly have always been enormously ticked off about the fact that we spend humongous amounts of money to cure people instead of spending humongous amounts of money in half to stop them from getting sick. It just drives me cuckoo. Yeah. And so I think climate is exactly fits the same framing. We would rather spend oodles of money on seawalls and other things to adapt than recognize that we need to really stop the problem from happening. And so I loved being there, and we've done great work. And I see that the center now has a capacity to raise issues about climate and health in a very direct way. But when the NRDC position came along, I felt like the center was stable enough that it could continue and to make their voices, this voice heard. But I also thought that it just added a lot of punch to the ability to make this message clearer and more heard. NRDC is a really great place to be. They have very smart policy people. They have lawyers, every one of which has sued me at least 100 times. Yes. I would say most of the time well-deserved, but not all. I try not to get depressed about this because it is a big issue, but you read what the science is telling us, and we just can no longer think that the pace of change can match the energy that's in this sphere today. We need more energy. Yes. We need quicker pace of change than government generally functions at. Totally. So I just thought that NRDC, given its history of success in many of these areas, and some of the people I know that are really good at this stuff, I just wanted a chance to make a bigger difference, not a bigger difference, but faster. Yeah. To give them an ability to make change faster.
Would you say that they are definitely having a tremendous impact? They actually sued the Trump administration 96 times. And from the closed cases, 59 from all the closed cases, they won 54. So they are pretty effective. Yes.
Oh, that's tough. I'll go in and ruin that record immediately, I'm sure, but no, we'll keep it up.
So I was reading that when did you talk to the NRDC employees, or was it a conference? Was it a video conference, or was it a state?
What?
well, I was reading that you sent a statement or it was a video conference, I'm not sure what it was, but that you said that these were critical times and organizations like NRDC were so needed and it was created for this moment. Yeah. So why they are so important, environmental organizations and basically, I mean, everything that we need from everyone to work on it.
Yeah, I did. When the announcement was made, I went to New York to meet some of the staff because that's like I love managing. It's a really fun thing because I love people, and so I was there and it was they were just waiting for a moment of time when they knew they had somebody who, you know, the only quality I have that's indisputable is I'm fearless.
That's a great quality.
I'm fearless. I just think we need leadership now. Yeah. We need people who aren't going to accommodate the middle ground, who are going to push the envelope and move things forward, and are going to recognize at the same time that the change we're looking for is fairly dramatic. And if you don't think about the people who are most disadvantaged in the current situation, who will be most disadvantaged if you don't bring them along, then you're not going to win. And so it was a wonderful time for me to get the staff at NRDC a little jazzed up and engaged and let them know that nothing is business as usual anymore. You know, we just have to think really outside the box and figure out how to capture the energy of the young people with the savviness of the people my age and figure out how to make change happen. And I think one of the reasons why I'm so excited about this gathering is that, you know, I know that communication is frankly the whole ball of wax. It's how you get people engaged, how you get them excited, how you talk to them, how you frame it in a way that makes them realize that it's not really explaining glaciers better or polar bears. It's really just about us and our grandchildren. And I think it's what I live for is my 2 grandchildren. And what I live for are my 3 kids. And I don't want to deny myself an ability to make a difference in no matter what it takes. And I think that's what I look for. That's why I'm going to NRDC.
Wonderful. Well, going a little bit back, the job that you did at the EPA as an administrator of the EPA was wonderful, and actually was a continuation of efforts over the years to pass legislation to protect the health of the people and the environment. So, could you take us to the moment when the present administration announced that they were going to choose Scott Pruitt and then Andrew Wheeler to lead your organization? How did you feel, and how bad is the harm that they have done?
Should we go off the record? No, I'm only kidding. You know, I had met Andrew Wheeler. Honestly, I had met him. I met him at oral arguments on the Clean Power Plan, and we buried the other side. We were really good. It was great oral arguments, and he seemed like a fine person. I knew he had sued the agency like 14 times or something, but you know, it really wasn't him I was worried about when he went in there. Just things were so dramatically different. It was really, the thing I liked best about it was their total ineptness. So, totally inept. Yeah. You know, they had a few people writing rules, and those rules got overturned over and over and over because they weren't following the procedures that you need to follow for public input and process. So they got sort of slammed down a lot. Andrew Wheeler, I always thought was a much more clever person. I've met Andrew Wheeler a bunch of times. I don't dislike Andrew Wheeler. But we had a brief conversation in his office at one point in time, and Andrew Wheeler's problem is that he works for an administration which is asking him to come up with outcomes, not not do the job or the mission of the agency. And I told him that. And so it is what it is. And so it was upsetting to me. But what I think tapers that concern a little bit, tampers it down a little bit, is the fact that they've made a lot of announcements, but in the end, they've not done a lot because they've not done it well, and they've not followed the science and the law. And I'll tell you, I got a lot of pressure when I was at EPA because of the challenge of climate change, how difficult it is, which I don't disagree. We needed more action, more action. But I did everything I could to temper that by looking at the tools we had available in our authority. And even though you want to, you don't exceed it. Of course. Because if you do, you lose. And I hate losing. I just stink at it. I'm really bad at it. I pout a lot and I get really upset. So I refuse to do more just because I wanted to if the authority wasn't there. And if I couldn't get the science to do that. And so I felt pretty confident that we would be okay even with, a Scott Pruitt and an Andrew Wheeler there. And I think so far it's not that bad.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Having said that, the EPA itself is an agency in distress.
Yes.
In distress. The people there going from me to this.
I cannot imagine.
Like, oh, I feel so bad for them. It's really sad. It's very difficult.
Thinking about from the journalistic point of view, do you think the journalists we hear give it a fair coverage to what is happening at the EPH and what is happening with the environment today?
Good question. I would like more, but I would probably always like more. I think what gets I think there's a lot of things going on at EPA and at any science-based agency that's just very hard to communicate in common language and get people excited about it. There are so many things that I get so angry about and upset about and concerned about. I wouldn't know how to craft them in a 3-sentence blip, and so it's very hard. I think there's more attention being paid than there has in the past, but there's so much more being done to dismantle the agency and basically science itself. And it's the science itself that's the hardest to translate because people don't even know how science gets done. Really? Yeah. I mean, seriously. So, science is done as you put up a hypothesis and you gather a lot of data to figure out if you got it right. So when we laugh about this with our climate scientists because they're lovely people, but they talk in language nobody understands.
Absolutely.
Like nobody understands. So I can understand why nobody would cover it. But they came running in when the IPCC report came in right before the Paris COP, the Conference of the Parties, was gathering, and they said, "This is really great. I think we've nailed it now," because it said that it was very, very likely that anthropogenic emissions were causing climate change. We added a very, and they were certain that this would be all that was necessary. And it's just not how people learn to think. They think a fact needs to be stated with certainty. Yes. And scientists always gather these uncertainties. And we talk about this a lot because part of what we do at the center is we do a lot of work with medical professionals to talk about climate. And medical professionals are great because when you go into an emergency room and you have pain on the bottom left side of your stomach and they feel it and your appendix is swelled, they don't say it's very, very likely that you need to have your appendix removed. They say, hey, you got to have your appendix removed. That's the kind of thing that we need to say, but they refuse to say it like that. And then when I say it, they go, oh, woo, you know, that's the challenge. And so I can't criticize journalists for not covering it. I do criticize folks like me for not being able to translate it as effectively as I could. So it means something.
Well, and I think the scientists have recognized that they have not done a very good job. I interviewed a couple of months ago a Nobel Chemistry Prize, and he was saying that they try to be so conservative, and when we talk about the climate crisis, they have been for decades. They know what is happening today for decades, and it's just now that they are truly just sounding the alarms that we need to do something. When you think about the situation that we are today, how do you feel? I mean, what do you feel that is going to happen?
Well, to be very honest with you, I feel like we are at a pivot point where I'm not sure how things are going to go. Honestly, it depends on the 2020 election in the U.S., because what the U.S. does matters so much to the rest of the world. But we really have an opportunity, if that goes okay, to, I think, have a complete change in the way we think about climate change. I don't think young people are going to tolerate the kind of hedginess that we've brought to this issue. They just want answers. And I think part of the challenge that we all face in gathering together is, how do you tell those stories and how do you focus on solutions? I'm so tired of talking about the problems, and I'm so excited about the solutions, and we just don't talk about them. You know, one of the things that really drives me crazy is that people don't seem to recognize that I do not believe that if you embrace climate solutions, you have to sacrifice. I honestly believe it's not that's not true. Because if you think about it, you know, you look at issues like heat stress, which to me is a really big issue that's hardly ever covered. Because you've got millions of people who die all the time quietly. And it's just not a dramatic news story. It just happens all the time. But if you look at it, if the answer is you got to have more trees, is that a painful thing? You've got to have playgrounds for kids. You've got to have, you know, rooftops that are white instead of black. Am I outraged by any of those things? The thing that drives me cuckoo is that what you need to do to correct climate change is exactly the same things you need to have healthy communities, to have healthy human beings. We've just not looked at it that way. And so you've got a governor in Ohio that's decided that he doesn't want to, he's getting away with renewable fuel standards and this, that, and the other thing. I'm looking forward to the day when busloads of elderly people go to that White House, to that governor's office and say, why do I have to pay more money for electricity because you've decided you don't like renewable energy? Because it's cheaper in Ohio. So that's to me part of the challenge is to talk about climate, but also let's talk about the future. Let's talk about what we can do together. Let's talk about why that is a better world for us.
Do you think we don't cover enough
No, I
stories about
don't.
solutions?
I don't think any of us do that because we're so invested in getting people to understand the problem that the solutions are just sitting out there ready to be grabbed. Now, I'm not suggesting that everything we know now, if it were taken up by everybody, is going to be the answer. But I know that until human beings get engaged and move forward, they will never get to the answer. And so that's why I'm so invested in looking not just at making the problem relevant, but make the solutions exciting. If you've driven an electric car, and if you made them affordable, no one would ever drive the other kind of stuff.
Totally.
The internal combustion engines. They drive fabulously because they're motors, not engines. The minute you put your foot on the gas, it flies.
Yes.
I'm not sure that's great for safety reasons, but it's really fun to drive.
Yeah.
And it doesn't pollute the air. It doesn't kill people. It doesn't. So all these things, I don't think anyone is projecting them in terms of the vehicles, and pun intended, that will get us to a better future.
And that is happening actually in every industry. When you talk about the meat industry, there is a plant-based replacement for the meat industry. And if you make it delicious, and if you make it exciting, and if you make it cheaper, people will choose that.
Yes, they will.
It's healthier.
And the challenge in that area, and this is great, this is why I love being at the School of Public Health, is the nutrition. I was working with the chair of the Department of Nutrition, and we did an op-ed because I'm really ticked off at Beyond Burgers and Impossible Burgers. I'm sorry if anybody has invested heavily in either of those two things. Because they basically are heavily processed food, where they've chopped up the protein, raised up the salt, and they have no nutritional value, and they're competing against plant-based vegetarian food that we've finally grown to recognize is really good for us and tastes good.
Yeah.
We will never stop turning away a free lunch in this country, I'll tell you. It's amazing. We will always have an opening for somebody to think of something that doesn't work and grab onto it. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
I'm just so ticked off.
Well, I wanted to know, besides Noticias Telemundo, where do you get your news?
I definitely get my news from you. I have a lot of clipping services, which I got a habit in a long time ago. I read the Times, I read the Washington Post, I read the New Yorker magazine, I read the Globe. That's pretty much what I do every day.
Have you seen a change in the last, I mean, I have seen it personally, but have you seen it in the last 2-3 years in the way the media is covering this issue?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're doing a much better job of it. I still think there's a lot of room for personalizing and storytelling. I still think we have a lot of people in this country who turn the channel and find it very boring to listen to this stuff, or not relevant to them. So I think things are getting better. It's just that I think we don't have the energy we need to get to the answers we have to have as quickly as we have.
What would you recommend for journalists to make the stories relevant? And I think this was one of the issues that you all guys raised when we were talking about the challenges. How do you make it simple, understandable, and that it resonates with our audience and our communities, that they have to care about this issue?
I started the Center for Climate Health and the Global Environment because I honestly believe I've been doing this work for a really long time, trying to make pollution understandable to people and look at the connections, because lots of people die from pollution every year. And it's at one point in time, it was a given because that's how industry sort of grew up, but it can't be anymore. And I see climate change as just carbon pollution. It's just harder to see and communicate, but I have never, ever found a way to make people care about anything unless it mattered to their own families and to their own kids. There is nothing else that makes them stand up and pay attention and be ready to do whatever it takes. And so I think the connection between climate and health is everything. I think that's what we have to talk about. I think we have to talk about what it means for every single human being and allow them to understand that it is not an insurmountable problem, and figure out how to get them activated at the community level. I talk a lot to people who are so discouraged because of what's going on in the White House and at EPA today. And I really, and I believe this entirely, is that if they work in their own communities, good things happen. Nothing in the United States ever happens at the federal level first that's good.
Oh, okay.
And so if we can personalize this, tell stories about people who have done good things in their own community, get our kids to work in their own schools, talk about it as if it's a normal conversation. I tell people when you're gathering at Thanksgiving, and even though Uncle Henry is there and he's a curmudgeon, bring it up. What the hell? Who cares whether he's a curmudgeon? It's a normal part. It has to be a normal part of the conversation.
Totally. What for us reporters on Jonas, would you give us like what would be good sources for us to start looking for stories?
Liz Perchia right there. She's a good source for stories. I honestly think the closer you get to people's homes, the better. So you got to look at some of the cities that are doing really good things where people really appreciate it and it's making their lives easier. You know, I live on a very busy street in Boston, and when I look out my window, I'm right on the street. It is packed with cars from 6 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock. In Boston now, you can't move around from maybe at 10:30 to 1:30 is okay. After either ends is awful. If this is how people want to live, that's fine. I don't. You know what I mean? So I think you need to localize it, and I think you need to talk about if this changed, what would that mean? And not so much in terms of what it means for the big climate, but what it means for you and I in terms of being able to get around. And I don't know, Vanessa, but I think the equity issue is the biggest issue for young people. They have no problem saying that the world today is unfair. And, you know, we get hardened to that. The longer we live, the more we sort of accept inequities as being the way things are. And it's wrong.
Yeah.
And I think young people will not tolerate it. And climate change hits the most vulnerable always first.
Yes.
And that's why health is important, because health does exactly the same thing. Yes. You know, if you're in public health, you are fighting for the most vulnerable every day of your life. And that, I think, is a message that needs to be honed in and hammered every time. I am not leaving the young people to this because I have sort of 20 more years of yapping, I think. Maybe not. Maybe no one will listen to me, but I'll give it my best shot. But I think I need to join them in this. And so I think the young people are the answer. I think equity is a strong message, and telling those stories is the most important thing we can do.
Definitely, they are a generation that are not taking no for an answer. I mean, they're fighting with everything they got. And
I just need for them not to get discouraged about the pace of change that can actually happen in society. They need to be hopeful, and they need to have some stamina, because nothing changes that quickly.
When we were having dinner, you asked me why this issue was so personal for me. So I want to ask you the same question. Why this issue is so personal for you?
Okay, that's not fair. All right, I will, and then you have to tell me. I don't know. I think it's always been. I mean, pollution ticks me off. I don't like people to be hurt by something that you could fix. That doesn't have to happen. And climate change became a really big issue for me maybe about 20 years ago when I realized what was going on with the science. And I really realized that you could fix it in a way that it was really calling attention to the instability in our world, and to the fact that we needed to make change. And I think maybe climate change is more a reflection of the fact that I really feel the need to build communities again. I think that people have become disconnected with one another, which is why I like community-based work. I like community-based solutions to climate. I don't want a technical solution. I want a personal solution. And as soon as you have, I had 3 children and 2 grandchildren. As soon as that happens, and I did the same thing. I counted how old my grandchildren are going to be when, and I said, oh shit, this isn't working for me. And I had to get engaged. So it's a whole bunch of things that came together, but have become much bigger issues and growing issues and concerns for me over time. How about you?
Okay, well, it was because of my son Sasha, that is right there. When he was 4, I remember we saw the documentary An Inconvenient Truth, and he was so in despair and so afraid, and he asked me, "Oh my God, Mom, can this truly happen?" And I had to say yes. So I remember he came up with ideas like, okay, so I'm going to talk to my friends, I'm going to turn off the lights, change the water of my fish tank only once, not twice a month, and all these things. And then he say, Mom, what are you going to do? And at that moment I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? I need to do everything that I can. I need to do everything that is on my power. I need to use all the resources, my voice, my tool, my craft, to make a difference. And that is my strength, And I think for every mother, for every father, for every grandmother, grandfather, aunt, uncle, it's something that we need to leave a better planet for them, and therefore it is my life mission. I feel it. I'm completely committed to telling the story of climate change.